So, The Rise of Skywalker was bad. Really, really bad. Probably the third worst Star Wars movie behind Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And there are many reasons why this movie in particular is an insult to the franchise, but many people have already pointed out many of those issues in great detail, analyzing all the plot contrivances, inconsistency of character, shitty dialogue, lack of good pacing, and just terrible story. I'm here to talk about something much less substantial and subjective. Something that hasn't been talked about as much, and I feel like it's time to address, and that is the awful and lazy production at display in much of this movie. Now to begin, obviously not everything about the production, aesthetic, and look of the movie is bad. There's still a few things and, a few tidbits here and there that I actually kinda like. The cinematography was pretty solid, the color palette of most of the scenes was fantastic, the puppets in the movie for the most part looked pretty great, and many of the sets in the movie felt grand and impressive. Most of those things served to make the movie a lot more bearable than the prequels, but there's still a lot that I want to talk about. Star Wars has always been a never-ending streak of great designs, toys, action figures, costumes, sets, and so on. And Star Wars kind of invented this kind of technique of marketing, and each movie would display a new variety of toys to sell, each one with something new to add to the universe, its technology, and its overall aesthetic. By the time the prequels came in, which, as bad as they were, still displayed a ton of great designs that expanded on the universe, both in the amount of planets, locations, characters, but also in the evolution of its technology. They hired only the best people to carry the look of this franchise. So when Disney came in and bought the rights to Star Wars, many people, myself included, were super excited to see what would they come up with and what new design they could create. I could talk about the disappointment of the previous two movies in terms of giving us some new designs to look up for, especially The Force Awakens, but for the sake of time I just want to talk about The Rise of Skywalker for now. The final nail in the coffin for this era of Disney Star Wars. What I'm gonna attempt to do is show you the many ways in which some of these designs are just flat out garbage. So let's go through each one chronologically. I'm gonna try to make this into just talking about stuff that I hate and then talk about what I liked and then just talk about what I didn't have time to talk about. So yeah, that. So we already begun the movie and I'm already pissed off. Kylo's ship looks exactly like a TIE Interceptor, but with some more red features on it. You'd think that they would design something different for the main bad guy of this franchise, but I don't understand why they replaced the other ship that he used in The Last Jedi, which also didn't look great, but at least wasn't the exact same fucking model as something we've seen before. And then we get introduced to Palpatine, who they tried to make Palpatine look like he was almost kind of like a dead body, but to me looks like he got a bit chubby for some reason. If the idea is that what we're watching is just a clone of Palpatine, then why are his hands so fucked up? Can he even see with those eyes? And later on, his outfit changes, like he drains the life out of Kylo and Rey, and for some reason his outfit turns more red. I don't understand why. Like, does the lightning changes his color? I don't know. They literally used the same models of Star Destroyers from Rogue One, but with a dumb cannon attached at the bottom. It's like a kid made those things. And let's not even talk about the fact that each one of those cannons has the power of the Death Star. That's way too stupid to fully understand. And they're also supposed to have some red lines in the edges, but I can't even see them because the whole planet is blue and dark. So what's the fucking point? Then there's this giant iceberg, which looks great, but can somebody please explain to me what the fuck is that? Like, is that an unfinished render or something? I don't understand. So yeah, now we are lightscaping and shit. And wait. What is happening there? Are there two Millennium Falcons? What? Is this some sort of mirror planet? What is going on? And now we get reintroduced to Rey, which she still uses the same wardrobe. Again. I get they want to make their character aesthetic kind of consistent in all three of the movies, but it's so boring to look at. Luke in every movie had a unique selection of wardrobe. In the first movie he starts with some simple clothes because he's a farm boy. with white and beige to show his innocence, then later puts the pilot uniform in the Battle of Yavin to show his compromise to the rebellion. In episode 5, he wears more militaristic kind of clothing, with more grays and accessories to show his involvement on this war. And in episode 6, he wears full black to show kind of his maturity as a Jedi Knight, but also subtly imply that he might turn to the dark side, which happens in the movie. Originally, Rey was intended to have an evolution wardrobe similar to Luke's, but they scrapped that and now she looks nearly identical to how she looked in episode 7. I mean, they may have changed the outfit to make it look a bit wider, so maybe I could say that, but it's still the same concept behind it. And also they added this stupid hoodie that doesn't match with the rest of the costume. Wait, how in God's fucking name is this mask still around? The Vader helmet I can kind of give a pass, but this is too much! There is no way that after this, he could have found the pieces of his broken mask and Frankenstein them together to make pretty much the same mask. At that point, you're better off making yourself a new mask. Also, the new design of the mask is really dumb. With that red shit that's supposed to be weldings, I think it would have been much cooler to have like an almost deformed version of what we've seen before. Or better yet, just not having a mask at all. Why does he need it now? Oh, and also the Knights of Ren, which they're just so fucking laughable. There's so much to talk about them in terms of character and design. Firstly, that they all look the same. Seriously, I can barely tell one apart from the other. They are all people in masks. They all wear capes. They dress black or dark gray. None of their designs seem practical for battle, and their weapons are so pathetic compared to Kylo's lightsaber. They're nothing. And add to that the fact that despite them appearing numerous times through the movie, they don't even once use their weapons. They are the least threatening things ever. Maybe they would have worked if they reduced the number of knights to 4 instead of 6, and each one had their own unique accessories, or maybe use some distinctive lines of red to tell them apart more easily. Or better yet, just giving them all lightsabers. That would have been cool. And literally all they do in the movie is just pose with the camera. Now these things, while they look kind of cool, are completely useless. In a universe with so many floating speeders, why would you give the stormtroopers a speeder with chain? Something like that is bound to break apart in a rocky environment like this, especially if it's got a mechanism like that which launches people in the air. Oh, this knife, this fucking knife. Like most people that read the leaks, I thought this was just a joke, that it wasn't going to be in the actual movie. But because God doesn't exist, we have this knife that is supposed to be a location. Firstly, a knife should never have edges like that. Looks more like a key than a knife. If you had a knife with a shape like that, it would easily break apart. And the actual reason why the knife looks like that is so fucking retarded that it's almost better to ignore that it even has a purpose. Secondly, just by the way the actors are holding the knife, it's pretty apparent how uncomfortable it is. Thirdly, why would you put scriptures onto a knife? What if you have to sharpen it? Or it's too dirty? Or someone else stole the knife who can also read the language? Not only that, but this dagger also serves as kind of like a compass to point to an exact position in the ruins of the Death Star. I could go on, but you get the idea. It's fucking awful. Dio looks like such a last-minute design. It looks like if someone took a hairdryer and put it on a wheel. Plus he is supposed to be like a Sith droid, even though nothing about the way he looks gives that impression. Especially that stupid out of place green lines that he has. And then we get introduced to Zorii Bliss, who seriously looks like the lost member of Power Rangers Zeo. Her costume has way too many unnecessary details that only make her look dumber. Like, what's with the collar on her upper arm? And what's with the fucking collar she's got right behind her fucking tits? What purpose do they serve? Also, the actress apparently found the costume super uncomfortable because of that long ass helmet she wears everywhere. And for someone who's a spice runner, she sure does call a lot of attention with that costume. Overall, this design to me perfectly represents Star Wars at its worst, when the only logic behind it was make it look cool or make it look futuristic, without even questioning if it's a good design for the character. And it's very obvious to me that they wanted to emulate the coolness and mysterious nature of Boba Fett, but failed so hard. Oh my god, Darth fucking Ray. There's so much to talk about this. This is kind of like the biggest wasted opportunity, probably out of the entire movie. I mean, just the costume itself doesn't look that bad, though I have seen some fan art that looks so much better and so much sexier. But Darth Ray has probably the worst lightsaber I have ever seen. Why couldn't she just use a normal red lightsaber? What's the practical use of two lightsabers in parallel position right next to each other so that it cuts twice as much as a lightsaber? I mean, Kylo's lightsaber already looks kind of goofy, but at least we saw some practical use to the smaller blades on it. This has no excuse. I'm convinced that the people at Disney don't know how to design a lightsaber. At this point, I can take Jesus Christ's lightsaber more seriously than this shit. I'm just speechless. Like, this is the most laughable attempt at trying to be scary that I have ever seen. Oh yeah, now we get introduced to the final order. And what the fuck? What the fuck is that? I mean, I like the way that the final order kind of incorporates more red than the Empire that used mostly tones of gray, but this helmet doesn't fit at all with the rest of the uniform. If they made some parts of the helmet red, then it would have looked fine, I guess. Okay, so that was all the negatives I wanted to say. Now, let's get to some positives. Exegol looks awesome. But despite being a very good place to be the homeworld of the Sith, it doesn't look like a very practical place to hide thousands of Star Destroyers. Oh, and fun fact, the Sith already had a homeworld. It was Korriban. But they changed it to Exegol. Don't know why. Also, you can barely see the place itself because it's shot so dark and the lighting doesn't help. Having the new Resistance base in the middle of this jungle is kind of a cool idea. It looks nice. Kijimi looks great as a planet design. It's all dark and eerie, like with all those stairs, like it's a really old Italian city in the middle of the Second World War, with the snow to add a difference in weather to where we used to be before. And I also like Babu Frick. In fact, most of the puppets in this movie look great, and are sometimes on par with the original trilogy. They're that good. Having a scene that takes place in the ruins of the second Death Star is actually kind of a good idea. It's one of the few times where revisiting an old place from the first movies was actually interesting, and not just a way of shoving more recognizable imagery in your face. And the insides of the Death Star are so good. And they're actually kind of like a nice throwback to the first time that we met Rey. Also, this was one of the main ideas in the original concept art for the film that Colin Trevorrow wrote. And some of the leaked illustrations show how some of those concepts were later integrated into the story. It honestly looks great, and I would have liked to see more of it. And hey, look! You can see the Knights of Ren who are actually doing something on those scenes. But if you watch Return of the Jedi, you know that there is no way that so much of the Death Star could have survived, especially Palpatine's throne room. The costume design for the Black Woman is actually pretty good. It actually looks like something a person like her would be wearing, almost like she's wearing a bunch of metal trash on her, and I like how it complements with the clothes of Finn, despite them not making any sense as a couple. Oh, and there's also this scene. So everybody was talking about how dumb this scene was in particular, but honestly, this is the same franchise in which a massive fascist empire was defeated by fucking Wookiees, so, it doesn't matter to me. This new lightsaber that Rey has is pretty cool, but why are they showing us this lightsaber now? Why didn't she just use this lightsaber in the third movie instead of using Anakin's lightsaber again? So I'm now gonna talk about all this stuff that I just couldn't really talk about elsewhere, so, just to fill time. The Elasmec look pretty good, but they appear for about 5 seconds in the whole movie, and they are always out of focus. The Wayfinder looks kind of weird and plasticky, almost like it's made out of clay, but it's not that bad, and I don't understand the deal with it making whisper noises in the same way Anakin's lightsaber from The Force Awakens was. Snoke clones. So stupid. Fucking terrible. I don't know why, but a big hologram of just the face of Palpatine doesn't really work to me. It looks very silly, especially because of the way that Palpatine looks in this movie. He looks incredibly awkward. The Sith troopers look okay, I guess, but they have way too many details in their design, and they don't appear until the last battle for a few seconds, and not once are they the center of the shot. Oh, so Palpatine is basically an animatronic now. Okay, great. So yeah, that's all I have to talk about. Basically because the rest of the movie was just a series of moments that made me go, oh, I remember that. I remember that ship. I saw it in Return of the Jedi. And I also remember that other ship that is the medical base. Oh, and I also remember this one that got introduced in episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. And I remember when I saw the little Ewok, that was cute. And I also remember this place, that was really nice, that was really cool. And I also remember when he talked, and he had the same dialogue, and I recognized that. Oh, and I recognized that other ship. How much we trained in. So this has been said by many people, but this movie clearly tries to compensate for the fact that the story is so bad and stupid that they try to shove as many landscapes, worlds, characters, and recognizable iconography as a distraction, and it works exactly against their favor. Most of what we see is either a bad design or something that we have already seen before. To this day, I keep asking myself, why did the characters in this trilogy use the Millennium Falcon instead of introducing a new ship with its own personality? I'm not saying get rid of the Falcon altogether, but just don't make it into the main center of the sequel trilogy. When I see this franchise as a whole, I can't help but get the feeling of stagnation in this franchise and this world. Half of everything we see looks exactly the same as it looked more than 20 years ago, and the world building really suffers with that. Once again, there is an evil empire, a group of rebels, and they haven't moved on to improve their engineering or their vehicles. And that is due to the fact that A. Disney cares about milking your nostalgia as hard as possible, and B. Disney had no plans for this franchise in the first place. As soon as they bought the rights to it, they started writing scripts for it, shows and novels, and made plans for a theme park, and didn't really took the time to think about how the universe could change in 30 years, and all the implications of that. And that, combined with the fact that they started firing their most creative people because of creative differences, which could have been avoided if they actually took the time to find the right people for this kind of projects. Like, you don't hire a set of directors to work on your project, fire them when the movie is almost complete, reshoot most of the scenes, and expect everything to go right. Once again, when you look at the creativity that the people behind the original movies and the prequels put out in the look of the ships, it's apparent that they love this universe, but also they want to separate themselves from it. It's similar enough where you can deduce that it's the same vehicles and they have the same functions, but it's also different enough where you can tell that it's a more primitive technology. Something that fitted with a war that took place over 20 years ago. And I was one of the many people who have forgiven The Force Awakens for their more familiar aspects because I thought that would lead to something better, to something more innovative. But then in the long run, it became clear that they had no plans for this franchise and no real plans for the future of Star Wars. But hey, who cares? It's all just to sell toys, and really shitty, poorly designed toys at that.